I think the team that has the lead advantage in turn 1 could have a big advantage here just because there's so many ways that things can kind of snowball one direction or the other.
Well, speaking of turn 1, we are in it right now of round 6 in Vancouver. Skeledirge and the Wellspring Mask Ogerpon out on the field for Dylan, up against that Choice Scarf Urshifu and Chien Pao for Brandon. So Chien Pao out on the field, lowering the defenses of both Ogerpon and Skeledirge and Urshifu, which will be Choice Scarf, so probably not feeling too safe to lock into the Surging Strikes into that Skeledirge with Ogerpon on the field.
Yeah, really fun turn here where things go very wrong for either side depending on kind of the predictions they make, where even Ogerpon could take a bunch of damage here if it tries to play it safe and follow me, but neither of these Pokemon want to be burned either.
Yeah.
So should be a lot of fun here. Exciting to see what players opt to go for. Again, I think the beginning of this match is just really important where falling behind early, losing a Pokemon quickly, getting status quickly, can make it really hard to maneuver throughout the rest of this match.
Well, here we go into this match, a Terastallization to kick us off in round 6. That is a full water typing for the Wellspring Ogerpon. No longer has the water absorbability, but does remove the weakness to the bug type U-turn that is possibly coming out from the Choice Scarf Urshifu. Brandon will go ahead and protect the Chien Pao this turn, not going to take any damage from the Skeledirge or Ogerpon. That U-turn dealing about half of what Brandon would have wanted because of the Terastallization, and now Brandon gets to bring in a Pokemon in the back. Knowing that neither of these Pokemon on Dylan's side have protected means whatever is coming in has the ability to take attacks from both of these Pokemon, and wouldn't you know it, Raging Bolt is happy to tank a Horn Leech coming out from that Wellspring Ogerpon with the full Embody aspect on the board, and anything coming out from the Skeledirge, which does try to burn the Chien Pao, but does not get anything into the Protect. And now, Raging Bolt is on the field pretty much free.
Yeah, pretty good little switch for that Raging Bolt there, right? Where has a pretty good matchup with both of these Pokemon, resists most of their attacks. Avoid what could have been a pretty devastating burn there. I don't think any attack from Chien Pao would have been worth getting burned. So I think Brandon's probably feeling pretty good about that turn. And now Dylan's got to adjust a little bit, right? Where don't want to have this poor water type Pokemon, even with the boosted special attack, or boosted special defense rather, facing down this electric type Pokemon for too long. But it'll be Chien Pao fleeing battle first.
Chien Pao flees the battle, which means that Raging Bolt's defense is back to what it should be. Here comes the Hearth Flame Ogerpon, which will be able to tank a Will-O-Wisp with its fighting typing, or fire typing, as Ogerpon switches out on Dylan's side for Landorus, able to tank any kind of electric type attacks coming out from the Raging Bolt. Immunities on both sides, Will-O-Wisp into the Hearth Flame Ogerpon, but will be taking a big Thunderbolt for its troubles. Skeledirge taking about half its health there. Brandon not getting baited by the Ogerpon and the Landorus switch out.
Yeah, another really good trade by Brandon. They're getting Landorus on the field is a big deal, though. Both the Pokemon that Brandon is out going to have a hard time fighting against this Landorus, but he does still have his Terastallization available. Perhaps make Dylan think twice about committing too hard for anything. And we also kind of see the drawback of Skeledirge there. One of the reasons why we don't tend to see a lot of it is its stats are perhaps not as well optimized as many of the other Pokemon we typically see in the video game championships, and it's like quite a bit of damage for just a neutral attack from a Pokemon holding the Assault Vest.
Yeah, the Assault Vest, no offensive attack investment
Safety
from
goggles,
that Raging
yeah.
Bolt, or safety goggles
But
from that Raging Bolt.
No boost is really the key
No
there.
boost, exactly. The important thing is that Skeledirge just took a bunch of damage, does have the ability to slack off and heal it back up, possibly dodging a Thunderclap. But we'll just have to see how Dylan's going to be able to preserve his final Pokemon as Ogerpon goes for a Terastallization immediately, getting the Embody Aspect boost, going to go to +1 attack on this heavy hitter of a Pokemon. The Hearthflame Ogerpon able to do big damage now with Ivy Cudgel. But Dylan is afraid of that, protects Landorus, making sure that Landorus is safe for this turn. Does not take any damage from that Ivy Cudgel. Instead, just the Protect as the Skeledirge gets to fire off a Shadow Ball into the Raging Bolt. Like you mentioned, no Assault Vest, so still takes a little bit of damage, but another Thunderbolt able to just pick up the KO onto Skeledirge. So Skeledirge on the field didn't do a whole lot of anything. It failed 2 Will-O-Wisps and launched a Shadow Ball into the Raging Bolt, and then was immediately knocked out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not the worst thing in the world, though, right? I mean, I think Brandon did a great job of controlling it there, dodging 2 will-o-wisps, once with the Protect and then with the immunity, but did force a Terastallization. I think that's big for Dylan because he was forced to Terastallize that very first turn because of the Urshifu. Now both sides committing to Terastallizing their Ogre Ponds, and it's a nice spot now for Dylan to try to make a comeback here, threatening the option of a Tailwind with the Tornadus, and then Landorus trying to fire off a big hit to one of these Pokemon now, but they can't Terastallize to try to flip the type chart.
Yeah, one of the scariest things about being a Landorus player is not knowing if you are faster than the opponent's Ogerpon or not. But with the Tailwind, Dylan knows Landorus is now the fastest thing on the field and picks up a one-hit KO on that Ogerpon with an Earth Power. Huge KO there, huge offensive threat off the field for Brandon. And the Dragon Pulse with a critical hit just barely fails to pick up the KO in return on Landorus. That means Urshifu or Chien-Pao could come back out here and do have access, both of them, to priority attacks to knock that Landorus out.
Yeah, I really like the move of attacking Landorus there instead of trying to knock out the Tornadus. Perhaps you can easily knock it out with the Thunderbolt, but is Tornadus staying on the field really that big of a problem for you? Where,
yeah, you have Raging Bolt. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. You deal with it later, and I think instead you're getting the damage of the Landorus now, threatening a knockout with any of the priority moves. The critical hit could matter there. The damage on the surface doesn't make a big difference, but perhaps if that hadn't happened, it would have enough HP, or at least it could threaten the opportunity to substitute at some point in the game. It's now so weakened that it can't really do anything but try to swing one more time at some point. And neither of these Pokemon in a position where they're likely to be super excited about what they're facing down as Aqua Jet comes in and picks up the knockout. Yeah,
no opportunity to protect in the face of the Urshifu, which picks up a critical hit for good measure on the way out. Aqua Jet, though, will knock out the Landorus. Tornadus fires back with the Bleak Wind Storm, deals good damage to that Choice Scarfed Urshifu, but not enough to pick up the one-hit KO. And Raging Bolt tanks it easily, doesn't need an Assault Vest to tank a Bleak Wind Storm, and just fires back a one-hit KO into that Tornadus in return. And now it is just the fully Terastallized Wellspring Ogerpon staring down the Urshifu, the Raging Bolt, and the Chien-Pao in the back.
Yeah, sort of an awkward position for Brandon here, but not really anything stopping him from maneuvering around, getting these Pokemon back on the field. Chien-Pao still has that Focus Sash intact because it was not burned by the Skeledirge earlier in the game, and what now looks like an insurmountable advantage in Game 1 for Brandon.
Yeah, the one thing is this Raging Bolt is a little bit low, and Dylan does have the special defense boost to potentially tank, the weaker Thunderclap more than the Thunderbolt. But by being able to switch out, it gets kind of risky. Do you switch in your Chien-Pao and risk losing the Focus Sash for kind of free, but you need to target down the Raging Bolt? There is a world where you could just sort of catch the right protects and still make this happen with Ogerpon.
I think I attack on this turn if I'm the Raging Bolt, where I think the only way you lose is just making a bunch of huge mistakes over and over and just making sure you get damage down. You're attacking at least once. I just feel like Dylan's too far behind if you keep the damage in. When you see the Thunderclap, I think that's wise. Oh, that's a lot of damage.
Yeah, that's so much damage, even though this Pokemon has the Embody Aspect boost to the special defense. Dylan tries to pick up the KO and succeeds with the Ivy Cudgel because of the Terastallization. But yeah, with that damage down onto the Ogerpon, Chien-Pao gets in for free, still has Focus Sash, and there is still the Choice Scarfed Urshifu to deal with. That should be Game 1 for Brandon.
Yeah, Ogerpon's a mighty Pokemon, but only able to attack one opponent at a time, and with so little HP, there just isn't a way here. Really fun first game, though, where there were several turns where it seemed like things could go either way, but I think Brandon played those first few turns of this game so well, just avoiding taking any unnecessary damage, and it really paid off at the end, where his Pokemon were just healthy enough to have a really clean end game.
Absolutely, and Dylan with no options, again, saving that Urshifu for cleanup. Can't protect in the face of an Urshifu, so that's just going to be game for Brandon, as Dylan taking his time to figure out what adjustments need to be made for Game 2. It's really strong. Brandon led the Chien-Pao and the Urshifu into the Ogerpon and the Skeledirge, and really it feels like that Skeledirge didn't get enough going. Just missed, it whiffed those two Will-O-Wisps, fired off a single Shadow Ball. And it wasn't until the Skeledirge went down and Tornadus came out on the field to set Tailwind support that Dylan was able to get anything happening in that game. So I have to wonder if the Skeledirge is going to sit out in Game 2 or potentially hide in the back for a while.
Yeah, the Skeledirge kind of looked like when I tried to play Skeledirge there, where it just kind of hung out was a momentum sink and then lost. I guess if you think back through those turns, though, I mean, like, okay, well, what if he made different choices, right? Well, I mean, you could have attacked the other slot, but we saw Shadow Ball didn't really do that much to the Raging Bolt, which would have swapped in anyway. And I mean, having it burned wouldn't have really made that big of a difference. I think, you know, even with better reads, I just don't feel like Skeletor's is going to have enough opportunity really to make a difference in that particular matchup.
Yeah, and this Raging Bolt was actually a nightmare for Dylan on Brandon's side. When the Landorus went down, there was nothing Dylan could do to that Raging Bolt. Took multiple attacks, took the Shadow Ball, finally able to clean it up with the Terrestrialization boosted Ivy Cudgel from Ogerpon. But that was after a number of turns of chip damage, and Raging Bolt was just sort of running through the team otherwise. You know, able to deal super effective damage to Tornadus, super effective damage to Ogerpon. And without Dylan being able to do anything in response, you know, after losing his only ground type attack from Landorus and not bringing his own Raging Bolt, had no other options to hit that Pokemon for super effective damage.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting now as we think about what these trainers are trying to do in Game 2, where I don't feel like any of their Pokemon are like totally unpickable in this matchup, so I think Dylan could easily swap either Pokemon for Skeledirge. I think probably part of why we did see it in that game is that, you know, we're talking in the pregame that, well, maybe King Gambit's scary, right? And like having Will-O-Wisp makes that matchup a lot simpler. Wound up being there was no King Gambit to burn, and instead poor Skeletor just kind of out there just not really being able to get a lot done, and that's what's scary. And I think why that first game is very important in a matchup like this, where the team matchup is pretty volatile, where now, you know, if this time perhaps Brandon messes up the team preview, at least you only get to 1-1, where now there's a ton of pressure on Dylan. I think it's a really tough spot to be in, just because yeah, you know, there isn't a clear best way to play this matchup. I think it depends a lot on what both trainers choose to bring to the battle.
Well, we are just about ready to hop into our second match here, as both of these players are hoping to go 6-0. Brandon just needs to win one more game, while Dylan is going to have to win this match to keep that undefeated record alive heading into Game 3.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon doesn't change things up very much. It just felt very clean, right? And a lot of control there. And
so many options.
Yeah, I think I'd want to make Dylan beat what I brought to that first game before I really try to go back to the drawing board, because I thought he had a lot of wiggle room in that first game.
Well, here we are in Game 2. Dylan has switched it up, going for the Raging Bolt of his own and Tornadus on the field immediately. Like you mentioned, Brandon is saying, yep, it was good enough for Game 1. Can you beat this? And Dylan has at least given himself the tools needed to, you know, outspeed this Choice Scarf Urshifu, or just threaten it immediately with his own Raging Bolt.
Yeah, one thing I love about this lead combination we see from Brandon 2 games in a row, the previous game, it forced a Terrestrialization on turn 1, and you've got to wonder if that doesn't happen again here. You know, you'd like to start going the offense with Raging Bolt, but like, can you really just leave that in the field across from a Chien Pao? Not really, right? You've either got to switch or Terrestrialize realistically. So again, Brandon perhaps going to be able to pull out that Terrestrialization early and make the rest of the game that much simpler for him.
Yeah, it's so important to get the Terrestrialization early, because it just limits the amount of options that Dylan has. If you can sort of eliminate some of that uncertainty, it makes other plays in the future, like going for Ice Spinners into Raging Bolts, going for Ice Spinners into Tornadus, much safer, instead of like potentially risking hitting a Steel-type Terra from this Tornadus, which is what Dylan is opting for, trying to protect his Flying-type Pokemon that is able to set Tailwind, while Raging Bolt just fires off a Thunderclap into the Chien Pao, not targeting down the Urshifu, but Urshifu just going for a U-turn to pivot around.
Interesting, too, to see a U-turn as we know there wasn't a Tailwind from this Tornadus, or a Leer, I guess. So it's a lot of fun.
No Tailwind, no Leer means we could expect a Bleak Wind Storm to come in, and wouldn't you know it, all Brandon has are Grass types in the back.
Awkward, and really cool read from Dylan here, where, you know, maybe you wind up giving up the Raging Bolt for this, but was able to trade some damage, and perhaps you know, a Bleak Wind Storm in exchange for Raging Bolt could be worth it.
Yeah, and the Ice Spinner into that Steel-type Tornadus now deals pitiful damage as Bleak Wind Storm picks up the KO on Chien Pao after the Thunderclap, and deals good damage to the Amoonguss on the switch end.
I love it. Dylan gets away with it, right? I'm trying to think of the same thing I was. Oh, there's no way he's going to leave that in and not terrestrializes it, but that's exactly what happens, and that's how you get to 5-0 using a team like this one, right? Really bold play by Dylan, but he gives up nothing but the terrestrialization, I suppose, but picks up a knockout, deals a bunch of damage to Amoonguss, Amoonguss, who's now going to struggle a little bit getting its health back, even with Regenerator, where, you know, are you going to switch out and make poor Urshifu get hit by a Blitzwind Storm instead? Perhaps, where the cost is going to be really difficult, or really high, where I love that turn. Really dangerous play by Dylan, where he could easily have just lost the game in the first turn, but he hit the read. That's what you got to do sometimes.
Hit the read, and Dylan identifying that the flying type damage coming out from Tornadus matches up really well into most of the Pokemon that Brandon has. You know, realistically, what else could that Urshifu have switched out into? It could have been the Raging Bolt in the back, but, you know, got the call, hit the Amoonguss on the switch in, and with the combo of the Thunderclap and the Bleakwind picked up the Chien-Pao.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I mean, he probably knows now Raging Bolt's not in the back because it would have come out, right?
Absolutely.
So he gets a ton of information on that turn.
Ooh, and the Tailwind Draco Meteor into Amoonguss picks up the KO as well. So Raging Bolt now dropping its special attack as Tailwind finally going up for Dylan. Tornadus has done its job. We'll go down to this Ivy Cudgel from the Ogerpon. So Brandon finally fires back and gets a KO on Dylan's Pokemon, but now it is just the Choice Scarf Urshifu and the Hearthflame Ogerpon up against 3 Pokemon, 2 of which Dylan has not revealed yet.
Yeah, just a wonderful position to be in if you're Dylan now, where you can do the math like, okay, well, I know one of these Pokemon can't protect. If I have some means to which I know I can pick up the knockout with the help of this Tailwind here, the remainder of the game becomes pretty simple. Urshifu coming out here makes this a little bit interesting, but yeah, just a really exciting game so far. Dylan, you know, showing it's not going to be so easy to knock out of this match.
Yeah, well, interestingly, Brandon has not used his Terastallization yet, so has the opportunity to either go for the offense on Ogerpon, or this Urshifu running the Grass Terra type, able to resist Thunderclaps coming out from Raging Bolt. Puts things in a much tighter position for Dylan than it might seem otherwise, and no follow me on Ogerpon.
Yeah, I think his team sheet's really helping him out here. I think, you know, perhaps if this was close team sheet, you'd assume a different Terra type on this Urshifu and be a little bit less spooked. But because it is one of those Terra types that kind of just flips the whole type chart, makes the situation a little trickier for Dylan, where he's still got to hit one more big read to close out this game.
Yeah, and with the special attack drop from the Draco Meteor as well, those Thunderclaps and Thunderbolts would be a little less beefy to begin with, but Brandon is just going for offense. Goes for the Terastallization on the Hearthflame Ogerpon, boosting the physical attack of that Pokemon and getting extra damage boost on the Ivy Cudgel, but Tailwind is still in effect. Wicked Blow will connect and deal big damage to that Hearthflame Ogerpon as Brandon fires back with a Surging Strikes into Dylan's Urshifu. Means that Dylan's Raging Bolt, now the final Pokemon to be able to attack in this turn, just picks up the KO on Ogerpon with a second Draco Meteor. And now, with just the Urshifu locked into Surging Strikes because of that Choice Scarf, no Terastallization to save itself, and 3 Pokemon, 1 still unrevealed on Dylan's side. We're headed to Game 3.
Yeah, hard to imagine the way this one goes wrong. A really great game by Dylan there, and what an exciting game so far, right? Where showing Dylan maybe on the back foot in the team matchup. If you make the right reads, you can still pull it out.
Yeah, so many interesting reads there from Dylan. Like you mentioned, the open team sheet format really helping Brandon out. You know, Dylan did not decide to target down the Urshifu at all, but instead, you know, the real damage threat here is going to be that Ogerpon. No matter what, let me just fire off my Draco Meteor and Wicked Blow into it, pick that Pokemon off the field. And then what? This Urshifu is going to lock into Surging Strikes into my Raging Bolt. I can Thunderclap it at any chance, anytime I want.
Yeah, even after 2 Draco Meteors there,
yeah,
nearly a 2-hit knockout. Close Combat to come in here and pick up this knockout. Fantastic game 2 by Dylan, and you kind of see the power also of that Urshifu and Tailwind. Tornadus made itself such a threat, there was really no choice but to knock it out in that game, and then Urshifu gets to come out and take advantage of that, where, you know, often with these speed control moves, you know, we used to players trying to stall it out with Protect or whatever, and Urshifu does not allow that mechanic thanks to that Unseen Fist ability.
Yeah, really interesting, really great game 2 there from Dylan. Going to protect the Tornadus turn 1 with the Steel Terra, being able to catch the Amoonguss on the switch in. Realize that Brandon really only has King Gambit and the Raging Bolt for flying type resist. Brandon had not shown the King Gambit before, and by leading his own Raging Bolt, Dylan would have been able because knew to be able to pick up the KO on the Chien Pao with both of those, both the Thunderclap and the Bleak Wind Storm, being able to threaten the enemy Raging Bolt as well on a potential switch in. So instead, getting the jackpot, getting 3 flying type weaknesses that Brandon brought, no real shot after taking that first turn.
Yeah, I love it too, where, I mean, so many players, when you have the Tailwind available, it's just so hard not to click the button sometimes. Like, oh, speed control is good. I want speed control.
It's safe.
But yeah, I mean, getting it at the right time is important, where in this case, there wasn't too much threat of the Tailwind getting stalled out there. It was like a 4-turn game, but the damage mattered a lot. And I thought it was just such a good read where even if it had gone wrong, I guess we never see the 4th Pokemon to know exactly how things might have turned out, but it seems like Dylan kind of had checkmate there no matter what. And I think now this creates such an interesting situation where Dylan's now conditioned Brandon a little bit, where he probably has to bring some Pokemon that deal with the Bleak Wind Storm a little bit better, so he can play around that now too. Or does Brandon now become the one who makes a similar read? Like, well, you've sort of forced me to do this, so I'm still not going to. I'm going to mess with you a little bit, see if I can get you to play one step too far ahead.
Well, this is what happens in a best-of-3 set, as both of these players are hoping to keep their undefeated record alive. The winner of this match will only be 1 game away from making it into day 2 here in Vancouver. Both of these players are taking their full time to think about what Pokemon they want to bring to this really crucial match.
Yeah, this is just such a difficult team preview phase. Where, there's a heavy element of rock, paper, scissors, but somehow, even if you get rock and your opponent gets scissors, turn 1 can still go either way most of the times, right? So it's like, I think you'll have to think through, like, okay, well, what are all the ways that if I pick these leads that turn 1 can develop, but how do I pick back Pokemon so either I can clinch the game if I have the advantage or just not kind of instantly lose it? Because I think like turn 2 last time, in both game 1 and game 2, we kind of know who was going to win the game.
Well, Dylan has decided to stick with what worked in Game 2, leading the Raging Bolt and Tornadus, while Brandon has opted for Chien Pao and the Hearthflame Ogerpon. That is a lot of physical offense on the field, and crucially, easily covers the Steel Terror from Tornadus.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps the solution to this matchup is whoever strikes first wins, right? Where I think now there's a pretty free situation where this Ogerpon can try to go on the offensive maybe. You'd assume there will be a turn 1 terrestrialization to avoid, or to remove some type weaknesses. You lose your resistance to electric, but probably worth it. And it's a tough spot for Raging Bolt to try to call that, facing down to Chien Pao. Yeah,
it's all about, Brandon has so much offensive pressure against Dylan in this turn. It's all about sort of which target Brandon wants to focus down. Because there is no protect available on either of these Pokemon on Dylan's side to protect them, he will have to switch out or go for the terrestrialization, but the coverage that Brandon has with the Hearthflame Ogerpon and the Chien Pao, especially now that this Hearthflame Ogerpon has Terrastalize, gets the attack boost and the boost to Ivy Cudgel, means that even if Dylan goes for a Terrestrialization on defense to protect his Pokemon, they will still go down. Instead, Dylan just going for the Tailwind, which allows Raging Bolt to act first, gets Electro Web down onto both Ogerpon and Chien Pao, crucially breaking the Focus Sash and dropping the speed of that Chien Pao, as big damage from the Ice Spinner brings Raging Bolt down almost to 0 health, while Ogerpon's Ivy Cudgel will finish the job. So now Dylan has the Tailwind up and has speed drops onto both of Brandon's Pokemon, but Brandon struck first and got the Raging Bolt entirely off the field.
Really fun trade in that turn there. Getting Tailwind up first, I think this time is important. Potential Bleak Wind Storm not looking nearly as threatening this time. Would not have done enough without a critical hit or something to pick up either of these knockouts. So instead, getting that Tailwind safely so that whatever Pokemon comes in the back now is more threatening. I really like the Electro Web there. Dylan this time not committing that Terrestrialization, which I think is so tricky to navigate a game when you have to give that up in the first turn. And, getting the Focus Sash broken in this Chien Pao is a big deal too. So I like that play if I'm Dylan, but this time finally in Game 3, I think it's much less clear on Game 2 who's going to win.
Absolutely. Urshifu now out on the field, facing down the Chien Pao and the Ogerpon. Brandon's Chien Pao now working against him, as the Sword of Ruin will be lowering the defense of his own Ogerpon, while Dylan has, with the Tailwind advantage and the speed drops from the Electro Web, will be able to just sort of punch holes through Brandon's team with potential wicked blows coming out from that Urshifu. And of course, still has the ability to deal some good damage with Bleak Wind Storms.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, where I think Brandon got the knockout, but he's really going to have to try to survive this Tailwind, and it's going to be tough. Both Pokemon surviving for now. Yeah,
Chien-Pao holding on crucially there. Ogerpon takes another speed drop, but that does not matter because it is just getting wicked blown off the field. Ogerpon faints, and now Chien-Pao has the opportunity to fire back and attack. Another Ice Spinner will target down the Tornadus. Did not pick up the one-hit KO on the Raging Bolt, but does pick up the one-hit KO on the Tornadus as that Pokemon goes down. And Dylan, now down to his final 2 Pokemon, does have the big power of the single strike Urshifu, needs a lot out of that final Pokemon as well, as we see that Chien-Pao, Rapid Strike Urshifu, and Raging Bolt are the final Pokemon for Brandon.
Yeah, trying to make sure he sends out these Pokemon in the right order. Still 2 turns left of his Tailwind, and it's Landorus coming out in the field here. A devastating offensive Pokemon, and especially into this Raging Bolt. Perhaps Brandon predicting incorrectly about what this final Pokemon was going to be.
Yet Landorus, the final Pokemon for Dylan. You have to wonder if Dylan had that Landorus in Game 2, but Brandon, of course, and we at home are all wondering that as well because we never saw the 4th Pokemon. But this Landorus is in a great position facing down the Raging Bolt and this Chien-Pao that has both taken an Electro Web and is still slower than everything in Tailwind.
Yeah, sort of a strange spot here. It's the 2 turns left of Tailwind, so normally you'd love to just go for a double protect here, but Urshifu will certainly be blocking something very hard. However, I think it's still an option you can consider. It's not going to do anything to Landorus, at least, where that could perhaps help you stall out this game, but then you still have to deal with the turn afterward. Raging Bolt is going to protect here, avoid getting deleted by the Landorus, so we'll have to see what this Urshifu does.
Well, Urshifu just goes for the Sucker Punch, not letting Brandon get any offense off with the Chien-Pao, picks up the KO.
They produce a substitute here? Oh, it's Earth Power, okay.
Protect from the Raging Bolt, keeps itself safe from the Earth Power. Dylan not going for substitute, just trying to sort of check Brandon, be like, you know what? I'm just not going to let you get turns.
Ooh, I'm not sure if it matters. As much as the substitute would have been nice there, I mean, Aqua Jet is not going to be a one-hit knockout here, I wouldn't think. And you'd assume the 2 Pokemon could double target, perhaps this Urshifu, and then you wind up in a situation later in the game, maybe, where Landorus is caught out fighting a Raging Bolt, and I don't know if he'd be too upset about that.
Yeah, and Dylan still has Terastallization available, has not Terastallized any of his Pokemon. So does have the opportunity to remove the water type weakness from Landorus and go for that Poison Terra, or just go for the offense of Dark type on Urshifu.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's what I do, just to try to make sure you burn through this Urshifu and assume that your Landorus can close it out against Raging Bolt, kind of no matter what happens.
Well, there is finally the Terastallization. It's the offensive Dark Terra typing on the single strike Urshifu from Dylan Salvanera. These final Pokemon for both competitors. A Sucker Punch comes out, so Urshifu is going on the offensive into the Raging Bolt. Sucker Punching before a potential Thunderclap, while Aqua Jet is locked into by the Rapid Strike Urshifu, and Earth Power cleanly picks up the Raging Bolt KO. So now that Aqua Jet not quite a 2-hit KO on the Landorus as Tailwind peters out.
Yeah, I like that move even more. You kind of see Brandon realizing, oh man, that was great. Well, now you have the Focus Sash, Urshifu facing down its rival there on the other side of the field. Hard to see the way out of this one.
Yeah, especially with Aqua Jet not getting a critical hit, not picking up the KO on Landorus, and Landorus coming so close to a 1-hit KO back. Dylan Salvanera's single strike Urshifu takes out the Rapid Strike, wins round 6, 2-1, and advances as a 6-0 record heading into our 7th round of Swiss.
Now, what a fun set. Things look really tough for Dylan after that first game. Kind of had a hard time getting a footing in that first game, but made such great reads in the second and third games.